everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. So happy today to have Jeff Salzman here with us from the Daily Evolver. Jeff used to work at the Integral. I think he helped start the Integral Institute with Ken Wilber. He's co-founder of a career track training and adult education company, and also co-founder of Boulder Integral. And he's popular in sort of the integral kind of game B space for his podcast, The Daily Evolver, which is awesome. And I was telling Jeff earlier, Ken Wilber, an integral theory, that was a big influence on me when I was 17, 18, took a long break from it. It's Jeff's podcast that brought me back into the fold. I remember I was listening to it during the time when I was writing and thinking about the culture war, actually. And I got this book, Ken Wilber's The Trump and the Post-Truth World, was a big influence on my thinking and my writing. And our friend Greg Thomas wrote a really good piece recently, and he linked one of my, I think, articles on Memetic Mediation, and that got on Jeff's radar. And then I saw Jeff talk about me on his podcast. I'm like, oh, I gotta bring one of my integral heroes to the Stoa and have a chat. And Jeff suggested today's title about how culture war is, there's a forcing function towards integral consciousness. So Jeff and I will jam for a bit, and then we'll pivot to Q&A. So put your question in the chat anytime, and I'll call you, unmute yourself. You can ask a question to Jeff or me. And if you don't want to be on YouTube, I'll just read your question on your behalf. So that being said, Jeff, welcome to the Stoa.
Thank you, Peter. It's good to be here.
And yeah, do you want to just jump in? Like any general thoughts you may have on the subject of culture war and integral consciousness?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was sort of riffing on it a little bit before we turned the recorder on. I think what integral brings to the party in terms of, the movement of intellectual thought is this, evolutionary idea, this recognition that we get from science that 13.8 billion years ago, something blew out of nothing and has continued to complexify into the world that we see around us and to this moment, and you and me and all these people, and that there is a religion in there somewhere, that there is something about that, this ever-increasing complexity, this ever-increasing goodness, truth, and beauty. And I could argue for that if you want, but that suggests that there is, it's Teilhard de Chardin, that there's something going on, that there is, that I am being lived, that there is a loving intelligence, that there's a teleology to this. And so evolution is a function of, Ken Wilber talks about this, it's a function of two things. One is differentiation. And so one thing mutates, differentiates into two, and then it integrates into a new thing. So differentiation and integration. And that's just built into this process of evolution. And we see this in the culture war. We see this in the biosphere in general, that evolution is powered by fighting and struggle, and also by, dare I say, fucking and friending on the other side. So that there is, this is just the way that, amoebas turn into sponges and fish and primates and us. And what is happening now is that in terms of development, we can see this in children. It's a big shift that children make as they develop. Piaget measured it or identified it, and we move from concrete operation to formal operational. And so what we can see in human history, that we have done most of our fighting in concrete ways. We've hit each other over the head, we've created bombs and guns and shed a lot of blood. And it's like maybe one of the only good things you can say about the culture war is that it's a war that's being fought in terms of ideology and abstraction and thought and formal operational. We've moved from concrete operational to formal operational. But the war continues. And I think that one of the things that being an evolutionary sort of calls forth from me is a basic friendliness to the whole thing, you know, the movement away from this idea that this shouldn't be happening. It's awful that it is, all these people shouting and all these different tribes and all of this consternation. I can't stand it. Somebody needs to be condemned and blamed. To more of a idea that this, welcome to the world of evolution. Welcome to this reality that is powered and lit up by conflict, by fighting, and also by friending. And that both of them have their place. And we're not going to see the end of it anytime soon. And I do think that that shift in, you know, attitude about it, if you will, I think brings on a new way of relaxing, becoming curious instead of critical, becoming what you described so beautifully in the essay you did on memetic tribes, being a memetic mediator, you know, the idea of being able to speak across different worldviews and to appreciate them and see their place and realize that they get to be who they are and that they're doing their job in this evolving catastrophe of life, you know. And I like that. That makes me feel better. And I think it also, I think it's time for, you know, that would be, if we talk about integral consciousness arising out of postmodernity, you know, traditional, modern, postmodern, integral, that integral is a, you know, it's an integration. It's a basic friendliness to the whole spiral of development in a way that no stage on the spiral is able to do at all. They all demonize each other, they hate each other. And integral is the universal donor. And I think that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate your enthusiasm and your general excitement. Yeah, this is term I'm playing with, like you know, the culture war and then culture dance, and
Yeah.
you know, it maps over to your fucking and fighting type thing. Um, and there's something about, like, I don't think I could have wrote that culture war paper if I wasn't plugged into Ken Wilber when I was young, because reading Ken Wilber was, it was like a psychoactive drug in a way, right? You just kind of like, oh, okay. And even if I didn't agree with it, just the fact that it might be possible that there's a telos here, or just the belief that it might be possible there's a telos, even though I was uncertain with it, that gave a certain existential hope, and it afforded to look at things a little differently. And instead of like, this is like, this particular cultural issue is existential threat and it's life or death, perhaps there's a reason why it exists right now, so it's housed in a different kind of integral meta frame. So I'm curious, from you've been in the scene for a while, like, how does plugging into integral theory and maybe adjacent spaces like metamodernism really afford one to approach the culture war in a different light and ameliorate some of that kind of the fight or flight energy that could arise?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could look at the current battle lines in the culture war. And one of them, of course, is critical race theory, woke culture, and all that flows from that, and critical theory in general. That, you know, you see it in the integral world too, and you certainly see it in the mainstream world, that people really fall on one side or the other from that, on that. And you can see that there is a, that from an integral perspective, that there's a continued evolution of green. I mean, right now, the leading edge of culture in the developed world is a movement into green. I mean, there's still, so green being postmodern, progressive, liberal, egalitarian, civil rights, world-centric, eco-aware, that sort of thing. That continues to grow. And that there is, you know, the postmodern self is often referred to as the sensitive self. So the sensitive self becomes, it is actually ever more sensitive to its sort of reason for being. And the reason for being, the green politically for sure, is about deconstructing the triumphalists' narratives of human history. So any idea that my tribe or my nation, my religion, even the rationality, the modern gift, is going to save humanity. Fuck that. Clearly it didn't. I mean, look at the first half of the 20th century. So there's this deconstruction that is, it's doing its job. And so people at Green have, they continue to be sensitive to the people who have been oppressed by the earlier stages. So we see that it red, or the warrior stage, that the world is divided between predator and prey. So Green wants to bring the people who have just been at the bottom of the barrel. They want to bring them into the party. Blue or amber traditionalism divides the world into saints and sinners. And so Green wants to bring in the sinners and all of the people and the divergent sexually, and all these old moralities get shattered. And orange divides the world into winners and losers. And so Green wants to rehabilitate the losers and bring them in so that they have, economic parity and equality and so forth. And so that's the sensitivity of Green. And what Green doesn't get is that there's been tremendous progress in all of its areas of concern, in terms of sexism and race relations and neurodivergence and, bullying, even warfare, that there has been a, great progress. But they don't see it because the sensitivity continues to, become ever more sensitive about ever smaller stimuli, if you will. So one of the things that so that's actually a good thing. So now we see that there is, we had, in terms of race relations and woke, that in 1964, the Civil Rights Act got rid of all legal barriers to race and really tried to create a colorblind society where the content of one's character determines one's success in the system. And here we are 50, 60 years later, and we still have these tremendous disparities in terms of race in America. So we have, the one that sticks with me is that Black families have a net worth 1/10 of what white families have. And that's real low on Maslow's pyramid. So that's really important. And so what happens, what we see from the wokesters, if you will, is just a real sensitivity to that, it's like, for me, it took me a long time to realize that being white actually did confer privileges in my life. But when I look at it, I can see that it's pretty obvious, actually. I had a company where I put my picture on the catalog, and, I was very much a face of the company, and it was on, business development. And this was in the 80s and 90s. And there's just no way that it would have worked if I had been African-American. I mean, that would not have worked as, nearly as well. So we got to let that in, we got to let all of that in a way that we haven't before. It's just basically seeing the karmic, basically seeing the karmas of history that continue to arise. And so that's good. The culture is actually moving forward. And even though there's a lot of consternation about critical race theory and wokeism, we can see that it's already changed the culture. I mean, I'm on a number of boards, and boards are always looking for women and people of color, and corporations to promote people. There's that that awareness, that consciousness has raised in a way that is, even though a lot of their stories and a lot of their sort of arguments are, I think, very specious, and the idea that race, race relations are worse than ever, or there's been no improvement since the 50s, which is, in Robin DiAngelo's latest book, that that there actually has been fruit that just continues to arise. And not bottom line, but the what's happening in terms of consciousness raising in general is that we're just seeing each other more deeply. If you look at what has happened with gay people since Barack Obama was against gay marriage in 2008. I mean, what is that, 13 years later? And look at what's gone on. The Me Too movement. I mean, I personally see women differently. I see them, there's the windshield wiper is clearing away sort of stereotypes, and I'm actually being able to see women in ways that I hadn't before, as people, and people of color and race relations. That consciousness is being raised, and it's not like one side gets to win the battle. The fruit is in the fighting itself, and I would argue that we are making tremendous progress.
Yeah, and sort of like the idea that consciousness raising is going to get messy. It's going to get, it's going to turn into culture war here and there, and shit going to be thrown around on all sides. And yeah, you know what? I can ask you questions all day, Jeff, but we have some other people having questions in the chat, so we'll get some of their voices in here. Stephen, you had a thought, if you'd like to share it. You're on mute. Yeah.
So here it is. Do you say telos or telos of development mean that things are getting better and better as time marches forward, a la Steven Pinker? I'm asking because it seems that the potential for things to go south is also growing at this time. Climate change, species loss, rise of fascism, etc.
Okay, you want me to respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how are things getting better and better? It's really a very interesting question, and of course, any idea of progress gets run aground by any number of things you can point to, like modernity has created the indoors, it's created tripled lifespans, it's created all the material wealth that we see around the world at the expense of about half of the natural world currently. Is that? I mean, that's you want to be aware of both of those things. And politically right now, you tend to go one way or the other. There are people who are either anti-capitalist or anti-government, but it's a little bit like growth and development in the culture is I think one of the ways we can understand it is by seeing the growth in individual human beings. So is it progress that my sweet little wide-eyed innocent 10-year-old turns into a sullen, withdrawn, depressed 13-year-old? Well, that's hard to see the progress in that, but there you have it. There's no option. I mean, so is modernity progress? Yes, of course, in terms of the material world and in terms of creating wealth, yes. In terms of the spiritual world, it's a sort of a disaster. I mean, we go from God being everywhere to God being nowhere, and we create all of the problems of the modern world. Is postmodernity, with its exquisite sensitivity and its world centrism, is that a good thing? Yes, but not if it tries to steamroll over the God and country people. They won't be steamrolled, it turns out. So they have to be accommodated. So is are things getting better and better? Yes, sort of. I mean, in the sense that things are getting more complex. And like human beings have always done, we have befouled our nests, and it's an ever bigger nest. And, modernity in the 60s and 70s, the environmental movements in most of the developed countries actually created remarkable results in terms of clean air and clean water. I can remember when I moved to Denver in 1978, we had the brown cloud. We have a little bit of it from time to time, but it's mostly gone. I grew up near the Great Lakes. You wouldn't go near the Great Lakes when I was a kid. The coke ovens release when I lived in Youngstown at 5 in the morning, you'd have to go close your windows. That kind of stuff, we tend to, as we develop, we clean things up. And what we can see now that there's a world-centric sensibility among progressives, among the green meme, if you will, that we can see the limits of the planet itself, and it's frightening. And I think that a lot of I think that it's frightening and is actually good news in the sense that more and more people are waking up to it. I do think that there is a sort of I don't know if it's unnecessary, it's probably necessary evolutionarily, I suppose. But there's a religious fire and brimstone. There's basically, the traditional fire and brimstone religious quality that's brought into environmentalism and used to, I think, frighten and depress children. But then I think, well, when I was a little Christian boy, I went to many classes about how I was, in danger of burning in hell. And I survived. There's a big critique about how, in the era of since traditional religions have been deconstructed, that political movements have religious qualities to them, like wokeism, for instance, or environmentalism. And I think that's true. And yes, there's a part in which you want to turn off your rational mind. And, that's what religion asks for, is that we actually tune into some of these deeper human chords, if you will. So there's a way in which the religion of environmentalism is good. It's religious in a good way because it gets people moving. It gets people motivated. There's a cause. There's there's something that has to be repented and redeemed, and there's a way forward. And I'm good with all that. I just want to notice it. I want to see it instead of just be completely buffeted and instead of just being it, if you will. I want to see it instead of be it.
Any brief follow-up or reflection, Stephen?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
I actually would also mention, the idea of the rise of fascism. I'm not so sure, honestly, about the rise of fascism. If you consider that, and I think of Turkey as a perfect example. It's a country that is seen, a lot of people see as regressing or has regressed into fascism and so forth. I'm not so, I think that a lot of what we see in these ways is a reaction to a mean modernity, if you will, that was overlaid on traditional cultures, like Ataturk, who came in and prohibited the wearing of, burqas and so forth. It's not like he changed anybody's hearts, or it may even harden people's hearts. And now there's a certain way in which these cultures, they have a center of gravity that's traditional, like Hungary. They actually get to be traditional, maybe, in a way that a culture that has a center of gravity that's orange, thinks is horrible because, that's welcome to the culture wars. So, we can see them going on between countries as well. And so I question this idea that fascism is on the rise. I think that, in a lot of cases, countries are finding their centers of gravity. and letting evolution do its work in a way that's a little more natural or organic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Never thought about that, and what's the rise of the far right in Europe, is a traditional sense. I think it's blue. Is that the color code? I
Yeah,
like how we're just
blue, probably blue with red, warrior, holy warrior. You get holy and you're a warrior, and it's it's a sour spot in human history. It's a violent, horrible spot. But most of it, to the degree that they're not actually violent, and most of them aren't, then you're in more blue territory and a lot of red performative theatrics. And we see that here with MAGA stand, the Trump people. By any historical standards, they're pacified with some high profile exceptions. But it's it's not like Trump created them. They were there. I grew up with them. They were just alienated. They were just quiet, or they were confused, or they just decided to keep their heads down. But they were there, and they get to be there, is what Integral tells us. And we want them to be there because actually we need them. We need every stage. And integrated, when we talk about integral consciousness, which is the title of this program, Peter, integral consciousness wants to have a strong traditionalism, in the sense of that I'm part of something bigger than myself, that there's an order, there's a reality beyond what I can see that is, I want to be ordered by, that's a good thing. We also want warrior consciousness, where I can kick ass, I can be juicy, I can be alive, I can have great sex, all of the stuff that comes with red, but we don't want actual, domination and murder. We want to play domination, but we don't actually want to do it. We go earlier stages into the magic stage. We actually do want, in an integrated consciousness, to see the magic of this creation. Oh my God. And to see that the trees and the clouds and everything is alive, and we can actually communicate with it in some strange magical way that, rationality wants to conquer, but it's there. And then even the earlier stages, the stages of we would call beige or infrared in Ken Wilber's model, where it's just basically awareness without a lot of discursive thought. We want that too. And that's what a lot of spiritual practice takes us to. So we want to be lit up on all of these stages in instead of being identified with any single stage, we're identified with a new space within which they're all arising, within which they're all welcome. And, because they're all welcome, there's a certain relaxation and peace that is, brought forth.
And as a meta note, I love it when a bunch of integral people come in. We're just all like start talking colors, like, oh, red, blue, green.
I know.
So you have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We're doing insider baseball today at the Stoa.
Yeah.
I'm going to take in Lynn. Lynn, you had a question.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Jeff. I'm gonna take home the mega stand. I like that, so that's good. What I really like your, that we're seeing each other more deeply in this time period. I love that idea of consciousness raising, and I also really like the idea of that you're talking about the friendliness and leaning into it, being inclusive. Yes, but my question is, and I'll just go back to it in the chat since it's kind of gone down a bit, is that we need to, like, these are perilous times, right? And, does, seeing conflict and the friending function in some kind of dance, you get the insight, integral sort of allows you to, oh yeah, you see those different levels, you understand. But I'm worried about this, being sanguine about it. Like my question is less at the personal and more at the cultural level. and how we how the culture gets shifted towards like we have to evolve fast, like these, we have to. So like what is the agent for that? So is it us? Is it, like what would you, and maybe I can just tie in the follow-up from Rebecca, where she said another way of putting it is how can we meet these different ways of being in a way that facilitates the healthy expression as opposed to the unhealthy and genuinely dangerous expressions. Like we're on a time clock here, understanding it and being in love with theory, which I am, I love it, but it's not enough. So how would you respond to it at the social level, at the crisis level? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say that I would, first of all, sort of at least emotionally counter the idea of that we're at extraordinarily perilous times and that the crisis is worse, bigger or worse than ever. We're absolutely in perilous times. There is a crisis, and there has always been. There's every stage, it was a meta crisis of the previous stage. And that is, so again, for me, it's an idea of being a little more just friendly to the whole catastrophe as it unfolds. And that then helps me, and I'll just, use my own work because I'm actually working on this, is that, basic integral theory, Clare Graves' developmental theory, first tier memes. So that's, the warrior, traditional, modern, postmodern, those worldviews are all powered by fear. They all have some belief that we fucked up, we have an enemy, we have to, we've driven it into the ditch, we have to be redeemed, we're bad kids. I mean, I'm telling you, if we individually talk about ourselves the way that we talk about humanity, we'd all go to therapy. I mean, that's what we go to therapy, is this self-loathing that is just typical of first tier memes. And so powered by fear. And then what happens at integral and moving into the second tier memes is that there's a new motivation that Clare Graves called being needs. Instead of deficiency needs, something's wrong, there are being needs. There's something that we can do here. There's something that we want to create. And I think of it just as shorthand as a movement from fear to love operating system. And so I want to love this cultural moment, actually. I don't want to be blind to the pain, but I do want to see that there's less pain per capita, at least in the material realm. And so that helps me to, when you talk about bringing forth the best of these, all of these memes are worldviews are dangerous. And how do we bring out the best? Is that we, first of all, allow them to be there. They get to be there. Modernists, rationalists get to be there. Warriors get to be there. Traditionalists get to be there. Wokesters and Magistan, they all get to be there. And actually, we, and this is a practice, but we see that they all actually are motivated to make the world a better place. It's really something. I remember arguing with a good liberal friend of mine about Dick Cheney. This was before Trump. I mean, Trump was, of course, completely out of sight. But the idea, she could just not accept the idea that Dick Cheney wanted to make the world a better place for his grandchildren. Now, that just was not ever going to compute with her. But he is. Everybody is. And so rather than, so then the sort of posture with people is one of curiosity instead of criticism. So you just get curious about them. So you move from, how could you think that, to, boy, how could you think that? What is it that makes you think that, we have aliens? What is it that makes you think that the world's going to end in 10 years? What is it that makes you think that Donald Trump's a good guy? What is it that, and so you get curious instead of critical, and people love that. People love that. And that's what I think, Peter, some of what you were talking about with this memetic mediator and this new dancing with, I forget how you put it, but I love it. And that just, I often think of something Steve McIntosh said, is that you want to be able to articulate their position better than they can. And I think that's just a terrific practice with all of our political enemies, and really feel it the way they feel it, because there's something juicy. There's something they get that we don't. And I want it, frankly. I want what they got that I don't have.
Any follow-up,
So
Lynn?
something like that.
Thank you, Jeff. Just a couple of comments, and then I like your point about fear to love operating system, because I do think there's structural violence. So, the idea that there could be like structural love, but I'm not quite as sanguine about the threats as being, always there's been, issues and challenges and threats to humankind. I think there's a multiplier effect in play now, like an exponential changes. So I'm thinking there's need for containment as well as curiosity, but thank you so much. And thanks.
Good. Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn. Brendan, you had a question.
Yeah. So, there's been a lot recently with, guys like Brett Weinstein, attacking wokeism. And, he was a victim of wokeism gone amok. And it seems like, he seems to attack anybody who is coming from that position kind of reflexively, and how would you, carefully criticize him to convince people from that mindset that, you can transcend and include wokeism, which has now become a pejorative term. It's essentially waking up, right? We're, rather than, being asleep, how, Wilbur was talking about how you can be in other developmental lines, you can be very, rationally focused, but still have slaves. So, we're now woke, and we're coming to different levels of that. And we can actually transcend and include it.
Yeah. I think Brett Weinstein and the anti-woke wave is predictable. It's right on schedule. He's a great fighter for that position. And I'm glad he's there. I'm glad he's in the arena, because I think the arena, there's no option other than the arena. I wish there were. I wish we could all just wave a magic wand and just, the lions would lay down with the lambs. But that's not how God set this up. And so I'm good with him. I'm good with, I love, a lot of these intellectuals, Coleman Hughes and, Ibram X. Kendi. I read his book on anti-racism. I actually think, again, he's won. There is at least in cutting edge society, in institutions, there's an anti-racist move to bring in, to not just colorblind, but bring in people who have been left out. It's just what Green does. I mean, that's what Green loves to do, is bring them in, and create space for them and challenge our, ways of being blind. Wake up, woke, So am I ever going to convince Brett Weinstein of that? No, that's not going to happen. I have a lot of friends in the integral world who are just implacably anti-woke. They see it as a wrong turn in history. They don't see it as progress. They are focused on, the casualties of war, and they're there. Again, we're in a war, a culture war. It's better than a hot war, but it's still, I mean, if I've noticed this about myself, that I've just really in the last, maybe 4 or 5 months gotten into Twitter. And I find there to be two things about Twitter. One is that it's addictive, and the other is that it's depressing. And I find myself ending a Twitter session feeling enervated, that is overstimulated in a bad way, and depressed. And it's not unlike how I might feel, only probably 100 times worse, if I saw the scene of a real hot war, with the bodies and the destruction and so forth. I mean, human history is fucking depressing, So it's not like I have some, that I find this to be really great, but I do find it to be fruitful. And I notice more and more, even on Twitter, one sticks with me. It's this Chloe Valdery. I don't know if you know her, but she's an African-American young woman. She's kind of, I think she's very functionally integral. I don't think she's ever heard of integral, but she is. And she put out a tweet that got a lot of likes and attention and retweets. And it was simply that I'm no longer interested in defeating my political opponents. That was the beginning and end of her tweet. And it just made me want to cry. And I see more and more of that. I see more and more of people who are just bored, basically. And boredom, talk about the engines of evolution. How about boredom? It gets boring to just be in the right fighting in the culture war, at some point. Not originally. I mean, when you move into the new stage, it's, you're not bored by it, but eventually you are. And then you want to move into the next stage. And the next stage is not demonizing our opponents, letting them in. It's not just the diversity of race and, creed and color. It's a diversity of worldview. Now we're talking diversity, and we're just beginning to really figure out what that is.
Any follow-up
reflection? Yeah, well, so what I was really kind of getting at more so was, even if you say, you're never going to convince Brett Weinstein, I think there's a lot of people who think like him, who are reflexively anti-woke without realizing that they actually should have the ability to contextualize sensitivity within a greater epistemically plural framework, and instead they are just attacking calls for sensitivity, and it seems to that there are people out there who we could reach by explaining that, demonstrating that we can transcend and include that, into some sort of second tier way of thinking.
Yeah, I Godspeed on that project. I agree with you. I think that should be happening and probably is happening. But I have to say that what I'm more impressed by as I, in my years of trying, is how resistant people are, actually. When they're in a worldview, they almost can't tolerate any criticism of it. It's like, I really do find that, I mean, my liberal friends here in Boulder think that I'm a reactionary conservative. And I have a couple really conservative, classic liberal integral friends, and they think I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I mean, I can't get them to, I can sort of, in any given conversation, maybe move them a little bit and make them see, but the next time it's like nothing happened. I mean, I'm just gobsmacked by it, honestly. But, but then, there's a time when somebody's ready and they're bored with their, right fighting, and that's the moment. And maybe, I think it's some of what Peter's doing and others. I think we're all trying to figure out what is the skillful means there. You know, what's the leverage point? Where can we actually place the lever? And what's the argument for transcend and include? But I have to say that I'm just jaw dropped at how resistant people are to it. And smart people who have subtle senses of humor and a sense of history and nuance. They can't handle any criticism of their worldview. Amazing.
Thanks, Brendan. And since we're on the topic of anti-woke, I'll tell you a funny story that you might get a kick out of. As people in the Stoa know, Jordan Peterson was my therapist for 2 years.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Before he went into the culture war. And I remember one time I printed out the aqua model from Ken Wilber, and I handed it to Peterson to get his opinion on it. And he just dismissed it. I don't think he got it. So I tried.
Yeah, I know. I continue to try. I mean, how many Ken Wilber books have I shoved down people's throats? I mean, it's embarrassing, but anyway.
Ron, you had a question.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm a longtime listener, so it's great to have you here at the Stoa.
Thanks for
I think you already kind of addressed my question a couple times, which was, as I listened to you talk today, I'm wondering if the integral movement itself needs to hear a lot of what you're saying. The formal integral movement, I know there's a lot of kind of naturally emergent integral, which sometimes is more powerful, just as an aside, but I'm wondering if there is in the integral movement kind of a privileging of complexity and being quote unquote higher, rather than kind of the spiral idea, and not to equate spiral dynamics with the Wilber model, but the spiral idea of paying attention to the health of the spiral and not being ideological about the higher, but working with what has to be worked with at a given time with the reality of how things are unfolding and worrying about the health of the spiral, which might mean being patient with a lot of quote unquote earlier levels for a longer time. And again, I think you've alluded to this, but I'm wondering, do you see any pockets in the integral movement that are developing that kind of understanding?
Yeah. You know, there's kind of a couple integral movements, I guess. I would want to make a distinction. One is the early integral movement, which was the Ken Wilber and Integral Institute and his books and so forth. And I worked with a lot of those people. I had Boulder Integral here in Boulder, where we had, you know, countless seminars and programs and that sort of thing. And what I would find, particularly if you stayed out of politics, you could have people have a lot of flexibility of mind and flexibility of worldview. And that there was an X factor that would arise in an integral group where people would just get excited, you know, where, you know, there's 50 strangers in the room from all over the world, and they feel like they're in a place where they can see and be seen in a way that they can't in any other, you know, group in their lives. And I see that happening again now in virtual space to some degree. I was on a group last night. I'm part of the Institute for Cultural Evolution, and there's this post-progressive meme that they're working with, and they have a group that, you know, people here might want to check out. It's the PostProgressive Alliance. You can check out the PostProgressive post online and find out more about it. But so there was 40, 50 people on the call last night, and oh, it was just delicious. I have to say, it felt like this was a group of people who were actually able to bring in the political part, where they really were multi-perspectival. They really were universal donors. And what was striking to me is that the problem that many of them, it surprised me really, that, you know, we always have, what's your challenges kind of thing, is maintaining an equanimity and not losing it when you're out in the arena, because you know, these karmas, you know, the magnetic pull of these poles is so strong that holding both poles or all poles in a multipolar world is exhausting, and people aren't that great at it, but they were aware of it. And I'm them. That's me too, you know. So I hope that's getting to some of what you're talking about. But yeah, I do see it. And again, I'm also, if I could just go back to the sort of negative or depressing aspect of it, I'm still surprised that more people who are self-identified integral are stuck in one pole or the other, and really not willing or able to see criticism of their worldview.
Any follow-up reflections, Ron?
No, that's great. I really resonate with your theme, Jeff, today. I often wonder if a lot of the culture war and the fighting is kind of a unhealthy substitute for a kind of necessary, healthy fighting and clashing we actually need to be happening, as opposed to all holding hands or something along those lines.
I will say that and this is getting outside of the integral world, just seeing the sort of the cutting edge of culture in general, that I do see that there is more fair fighting going on than there used to be, it seems to me. And where I notice it is the platform of Clubhouse. And I don't know if you know that one, but it's a new thing where people get on and they talk from all over the world on various subjects. And it's like there's a seminar. So there's 300 people in the room and there's 5 or 6 people on stage. And a lot of these people, they definitely have a lot of dueling worldviews. And as you might expect, the rooms that sort of feature dueling worldviews are the popular rooms. People like to fight. You know, it's like there's a fight. Let's go look, you know. But what I'm noticing is that the moderators and even the people talking are not getting as triggered as easily. There's sort of a self-regulation on demonizing each other that I find, and I see it on Reddit too. I see it to some degree on Twitter, where I could almost characterize what's going on in social media as a sort of messy mass therapy, a big gestalt where everybody's letting all their sub-personalities out and they knock it into each other, but they're getting more skillful in the process and, more aware. I mean, I often think that my grandfather, first of all, he probably knew about 50 people, but he never really encountered an opinion that was terribly different than his own, ever, politically or any other way, religiously or any other way. And now look at what we're doing out there in this arena. And I do find it to be tremendously, again, war is ugly, but war is fruitful.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Jeff, do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, or could you feel the...
No, I could keep going if you want. Yeah,
perhaps
this is fun.
Yeah. Who had a question? Rebecca, you had a question. If you'd like to ask it.
Gosh, did I? I've been active in the chat, but I'm not sure if I had a question a while ago, but it's a very insider baseball-y question. Not as good as a lot of these other great questions. And it was about if you feel that if you can speak a little to if there's a felt sense of the difference in how we interface with these different memes in different levels as we move between, say, yellow and turquoise as our kind of center point. I have a lot of interest in that right now, the kind of yellow versus turquoise way of being.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And, just using developmental theory, yellow is sort of more heady and turquoise is more hardy, So at yellow, you see evolution, first of all. So you see all of these different stages, and you see how they're expressing themselves in the world today. And you see, you know, this character and that character, very good at categorizing. You're letting things in, you're seeing how one relates to the other, and you're seeing this big evolving system. And it's really fascinating, you know, and you can spend a lot of really great time there. And then at some point, you realize that, oh my God, this system is alive. Oh my God, it's living, it's intelligent, it's loving, it's doing something, it's going somewhere. And everybody's on this rocket ship with me. And oh my God. And so that's, you know, this sort of big heart comes online. And it's not just about seeing and thinking and categorizing. It's about loving and feeling and welcoming and, you know, just seeing that everybody is my brother and sister. And that it's, you know, a whole new ballgame. So something like that.
Any follow-up, Rebecca?
I don't think so. Those really beautiful. I feel like it speaks to kind of an inner felt sense of that too. There's that sense of aliveness of this sort of across and down and within and without that kind of comes alive at Turquoise. That sort of that multifaceted attachedness that we become aware of. All of the levels seem more personal and vibrant and real. So I really appreciate how you articulated that. Thank you.
Right on. Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca. So perhaps I'll sneak in one last question myself. And it's like a memetic mediation question. So one thing I noticed with a lot of memetic tribes that are not sort of defined by being anti-woke or, you know, woke, they all got kind of like sort of cut in half, whether it's like integral theory, the rationalists, new atheists, Buddhistic scenes. It's like, it was a divide. A lot of Christian scenes from woke to anti-woke. And I've been thinking with memetic mediation, I've been involved in all these kind of communities in some capacity, either just watching them or visiting them, communicating with them, and figuring out how to talk to, you know, people who have, let's say, that woke temperament and people who have anti-woke temperament. And one framing I had, and this could be provocative or uncharitable, but people, let's say on the woke or more left spectrum have daddy issues. And then people on the anti-woke and the right have mommy issues. and then, like, you know, there would be psychological interventions, you know, or approaches to speak with people who have those sort of issues. And I'm curious if what's your thoughts on that framing and any other kind of approaches you think would be best, or how you found to be best with people with those two broad temperaments that seem prevalent in the current culture war.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the one thing that has helped me more than any other is, you know, so I'm a white guy. I'm gay, you know, I got that, you know, sort of one divergent thing, but, you know, I'm basically, you know, your generic 60-plus-year-old white guy. And so I want to put myself in the shoes of Black people who are, you know, feel like they're stuck in an underclass. And so I try to do that. And I have some limited success with that. But what has really helped me is if I actually just sort of flip the script and I see that myself as, I go back to my childhood, and I was raised with a lot of rednecks and hillbillies in Western Pennsylvania. And I know these people, these people are Trumpsters now, you know, so there are a lot of red blue in this, the traditionalists and so forth. And that white people, my people, have been oppressed by a society, and basically flip the script. So it's the white underclass and then the great black, everybody who's in power looks like James Earl Jones or Serena Williams, or that, and my people have been oppressed by this. And that has helped me more than anything else to just sort of navigate what it must feel like. Because I hear Black people talk about whiteness is suffocating, you know, and I think, oh, please. But then if I think, if I'm, you know, me and my hillbilly family and my people have been oppressed by this great Black, you know, culture, that I would find it suffocating to walk around. I get that, you know, that that there's sort of an X factor that excludes me in a way that, you know, I have a hard time relating to, unless I can see it as myself being the victim. So, you know, it's just a visualization that, you know, they don't understand the way that we think. They don't understand what we have that they don't, which is a juiciness and an aliveness. You know, that sort of thing helps me more than anything, to just befriend people who are, you know, in some ways making what I consider to be, you know, extreme claims of oppression and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your question or helps move the ball at all, but you know, that has been more helpful than anything for me.
Yeah, it does, and it resonates. So perhaps we will close out here. Any kind of closing thoughts or anything that's alive for you leaving the Stoa, Jeff?
No, I'm just you know, happy to be here and be part of it, and I'm really impressed with what you've done, Peter. My goodness gracious, and so Godspeed on your work. And I can't believe how fast things are going now. I mean, I guess there's sort of a way in which that's always been true, even though, you know, these earlier stages were pretty stable for tens of thousands of years. But we're in a stage now, and it's really the first time in human history where we have many worldviews online at the same time, and people in different worldviews, really, you know, 3 or 4 worldviews at a time, are trying to coexist. And that itself is creating a whole new fruitfulness that I think is, you know, slowly but surely and faster than ever, deconstructing these mono perspectives into multiple perspectives. And as I always say, evolution is beautiful, but it sure as hell ain't pretty. And so here we are.
Well said. Good words to end this session. So I'll make some closing announcements in a moment. But Jeff, thanks so much for coming to Stoa. It was great to finally connect. I'd love to have you back. And yeah, I'll plug.
Thank you. My great pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
And I'll plug one event. I don't know if you've heard of these guys, Jeff, but Solar Punk is another Memetic tribe that a lot of cool kids are talking about.
No, sounds great though.
They're coming in on August 17th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, a narrative strategy for a broken present, a memetic engine for a better world. And Jay Springett, I think he's the guy that represents the solar punk movement. He's coming in, similar to Metamodern, very optimistic. I'm excited for that session. So you can RSVP to that and other events at thestoa.ca. So that being said, Jeff, everyone, thanks so much for coming to Stoa today.
Thank you.